Watch my videos before going to bed. In 1986, a young girl opens her closet to find a man wearing a dress and holding an axe. He grabs her and ties her up, and then walks around the house and does the same thing to the rest of her family. While the guy is ransacking their house, one of the kids breaks free, runs next door, and tells his neighbor. The neighbor calls the cops show up, the family's saved, but the guy is nowhere to be found. The family leaves the house and stays with relatives in hopes that they'll catch this guy before they have to go back. But after a few weeks, they haven't caught him, there aren't any leads, and they say, you know what, we'll go back to our house anyways. As the family's pulling back into their driveway, the father looks up at one of the windows and sees, for a split second, the head of the man with the dress in their bedroom. They call the police, who go in and find pennies glued to the ceiling and weird writing all over the house, but they can't find this crazy guy. Until one of the officers found a secret crawl space in the basement, where psychotic killer Danny LaPlante had been living for 2 months.
Back in the Victorian era, when a family lost a child, they would make what was called a mourning doll. This was mainly for very rich families, and they would make a mourning doll to look exactly like the child that they lost. It would often be made of wax, and sometimes the hair would be taken straight from the dead body and put onto the doll to add an extra level of authenticity. Then the dolls would be put into the real crib of the child they lost. Their clothes would be changed every single day. They would be cared for like a real child to help the family cope with the loss. Back in that time, medicine was significantly less advanced, and the mortality rate for children and infants was a lot higher than it is now. A lot of kids died very young back then, so mourning dolls were a very popular thing.
Have you ever met someone who wouldn't take no for an answer? Charles became obsessed with Jillian after she blew him off at the cafe. Charles was the type of man who couldn't accept that anyone might reject him, so he found Jillian's address from the phone book and went to her house. He knocked on the door many times until he heard Jillian's voice say, "Charles, what the heck are you doing?" Charles replied, "I don't get why you wouldn't go out with me. We had such a great conversation in the cafe." Jillian replied, "I already told you, you're just not my type. But if you really want to know what my type is, I can show you." Then she opened the door. Charles stepped in. "You see that door at the end of the hallway? Go in there and you'll see the type of man I like." Charles eagerly went in and saw a staircase leading down to the basement. What happened next would shock anyone. When he got to the bottom of the stairs, he smelled a horrible rotting smell. Then he saw that he was surrounded by 12 or 13 bodies nailed to the wall. All of them were headless. On the table against the wall, their heads were arranged in a row. Suddenly, Charles felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around and saw Jillian with an axe. Jillian swung the axe, and as Charles's head flew across the room, Jillian picked it up, looked it dead in the eye, and said, "Now you're my type." Have you ever met someone who wouldn't take no for an answer? That's what happened to Jillian, but things took a strange and unexpected turn. Jillian always went to this one cafe, and one day she bumped into a young man. His name was Charles. Charles came from a wealthy family and thought that no woman could ever say no to him. He asked Jillian to have coffee with him, and she did. They had a friendly conversation for a while, but by the time the cafe was about to close, Charles gently grabbed Jillian by the hand and asked her out. She said, "I'm sorry, you're just not my type," and left. This made Charles furious. From then on, he'd come to the same cafe every single day to hope that Jillian was there. It got to the point where Jillian would look through the window and see Charles waiting for her. She'd feel uncomfortable and leave. It just seemed like he wouldn't take no for an answer. But things were not so simple. One day, it was the final straw. Charles brought flowers to the cafe and waited for Jillian. When she didn't show up, Charles took the flowers, threw them on the ground, and stomped on them. He yelled, "That's it, I'm gonna make you my girlfriend if it's the last thing I do." The next day, he looked up Jillian's address in the phone book and went to her house. But he could never have expected what he would find there. Follow for part 2.
Have you guys